I'm sure you're all aware that Officer Mensah submitted his resignation last night. First question right out of the gate is, the DA said that Officer Mensah was justified in shooting and killing Alvin Cole. Do you agree? Why or why not? Andre, I'll start with you.
I agree. In my history on the Milwaukee Police Department, matter of fact, in my first 4 years, I was in actually 4 different deadly force situations where I could have been killed or the individual was killed. We're dealing with a situation where an officer has to make a decision based upon what he's called to. He has to react within moments, and sometimes it works out great where no one is killed, and unfortunately sometimes it does not work out that way. And given what we know and the facts, I know a lot of people are tied to emotion, but we have to look at the facts and weigh those facts. And in reality, Officer Mensah really deserves our support, because having to go through that in 4 years, 3 different shootings, it's a traumatic experience. A lot of people look at it like, well, like he's just an officer. He's a human being, and going through that situation, being forced to be in that situation, really takes a toll on you. Constantly being second guessed, and you start to second guess yourself. So I believe it was the right decision.
What do you think?
No, I think it was the wrong decision. I can take this off?
If you prefer.
Yeah, I think it was the wrong decision. I think that people have to understand, I think one thing that people don't understand is that just because an officer is in a position where he can justifiably use deadly force does not mean that he has to. I probably could have killed about 10 people justifiably in my career, but I chose not to pull the trigger. The interesting thing about Officer Mensah when it comes to me and my experience is that after the second shooting, or the second fatal shooting, I looked at that and it occurred to me that he was going to kill someone else. In my opinion, as well as the opinion of some other officers that I've talked to, there are some officers who are looking to kill. They want to kill somebody. They get off on that. And after Mensah's second incident, I told some people close to me, he's going to kill again. Now, police officers are judged not just on what a regular person would do, but also on what's called what a reasonable police officer would do. Now, from what I know about the facts, I don't agree with Alvin Cole coming to the mall with a gun and being involved in whatever he was involved in. But there was a chase. Alvin shot himself. He went down. There were 2 officers standing right in front of him. Those officers apparently did not feel that they were in danger to the extent that they would use deadly force. Otherwise, they would have used deadly force. 10 seconds after Alvin Cole shot himself, which I might want to add that being shot is not like it is on television where you shoot yourself or you're shot, you wrap a rag around it and you get up and you keep going. Your body reacts to being shot, you get an adrenaline dump, and then you start to go into shock. That being said, Alvin Cole was on his knees and maybe even his hands and knees. 10 seconds later, Mensah comes up and shoots him in the back. And to me, that was bad judgment because, again, the other officers did not feel that they were in danger. If anyone had been in danger, it would have been the officers standing in front of Alvin Cole, not Mensah, who was standing behind him. And further, Mensah put them in danger because they were downrange. In other words, a round could have passed through Alvin Cole's body and hit one of the officers or anyone else who was downrange. So in my opinion, that was bad judgment. The right to use deadly force is a great burden for officers, and Captain Williams brought it up. I mean, it's a traumatic experience to be in a shooting, let alone to take a life. And in fact, it's so traumatic that a person would seek to avoid those situations, not to continue to find yourself in those situations. He didn't find himself in that situation by chance. He sought that situation and tried to find a way to justify shooting Mr. Cole 10 seconds after Mr. Cole shot himself. An officer's responsibility is to protect and serve. It's on the side of every police car. It doesn't say protect, serve, and kill. It says protect and serve. We are not vigilantes. We are not mercenaries. When you compare Mensa shooting to Dominique Hagan Brown shooting, Dominique Hagan Brown was charged based on what he did less than 1.5 seconds. He was charged on the second shot. Mensa was not charged based on what he did 10 seconds, fast enough for a reasonable, an athlete that's in reasonable shape to run 100 yards. That, to me, I have a lot of problems with what Mensa did.
What's your take on it?
In all due respect to what Ricky and Andre both said, I think that we are doing Monday morning quarterbacking when we look at what could have happened. First and foremost, my life is on the line too as an officer. And I'm not going to give somebody else the benefit of the doubt if I think that I am in danger or someone else is in danger. And that's something only the person who is going to that can ascertain. Now, whether somebody is closer to somebody or further away, it is the feeling that I have about the danger that I am faced with, that I'm going to make a decision for. Police officers are given a great amount of latitude for good reason. Sometimes they use it wisely, sometimes they do not. But we had a DA, whether we like it or not, that looked at all the facts that we talked about today, and he determined that there was not enough evidence to show that Officer Mensa did something that was beyond the scope of what an officer should do under the same circumstances. You had other witnesses that were there. You had the other officers that Mr. Burns just talked about that were there that had to contribute to that report and that decision being made. The one concern that I have is as we're concerned about what the decision that the DA made, that DA also had the same decision to make in the other two shootings that Officer Mensa was involved in. If the public is concerned with the decisions being made, in that 5-year period of time that we had to look at those shootings involving Officer Mensa, there were 2 different elections for district attorney. And so if you want to talk about making people accountable, if the community was disappointed with the decisions that were being made, this particular DA ran unopposed this past August the 11th. And 4 years ago, on August the 9th of 2016, he ran, and a person from this community actually ran against him that did not get the support of the community. So it's a little hypocritical when the community now wants the DA to make these decisions that we won't even hold him accountable for by putting people against him if we oppose his decisions. Now, I wasn't there, but one of the other things that we're not talking about, and I think Mr. Burns did bring it up, is that as much as what this officer may have done right or wrong will be up for discussion. And I'm not saying he did something right and he did something wrong. What I'm saying, if I'm put in that position, it is my determination about whether I'm fearful for my life or someone else's, and that's the decision I'm going to make. But the whole reason that there was even a decision to begin with to be made was because of the actions of a 17-year-old that was at a mall with a gun that this community doesn't seem to want to talk about. And that's a problem. We talk about Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha at 17 years old with a gun, and we see the end results of that. The problem is 2 wrongs don't necessarily make a right, but we can't talk about one side of the equation without talking about the other.
I wanted to talk to you all because of your experience in the field, and I heard you all touch on it. So I thought the next valid question would be, and I'll direct this to you first, Ricky, if you were in Officer Mensah's position on that night, what would you have done?
Well, first of all, Alvin did not shoot anybody except himself. And what Harrison said is true. Those decisions are split second, and people do play Monday morning quarterback. But you know, the problem with deadly force situations is that a human life is lost, and you can never bring that human life back. There were two other officers already there that had the situation under control to the extent that, and consider that they had been there 10 seconds or more before Mensah even got there. And they didn't see any reason to use deadly force. So what would have happened if Mensah had just said, well, let me wait 5 more seconds? And in those 5 seconds, if Alvin Cole starts to raise his gun and looks at one of the officers like he's going to shoot them, it would be more understandable. But Mr. Cole did not do that. Mensah should at the very least, or if you ask me what I would have done, I would at the very least waited and assessed the situation a little longer. And again, just like Captain Williams said, this is the third traumatic incident that Mensah had been involved in. I mean, I've talked to probably almost 1,000 killers, and I can probably count on one hand those who were not traumatized, you know, by the incident that resulted in the loss of life to the extent that they would want to go through that again. Now here you have a police officer, a trained police officer, who is seeking to go through that incident not once, not twice, but 3 times. That is a problem. If it had been me, I would have waited. I would have waited, and I have waited. Like I said, I've been in those situations before, as I'm sure all of us have, because, and again, this is Wauwatosa. This is not Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a lot busier than Wauwatosa. So we've all been in deadly force situations. Sometimes you can wait. You again, just because you're justified in using deadly force, and you can say, well, I thought I shot him because I thought. Well, what if he wasn't going to do what you thought? So let's just wait, just give it a few more seconds and see if he's going to do what you thought he was going to do, because maybe he wouldn't have did what you thought he was going to do and he would still be alive.
And as true as what he said, I mean, there's some truth to that. But what if that extra second turned out negative? I mean, it's again, it's us doing Monday morning quarterbacking. And the bottom line is, if I'm in that situation, do I give somebody else the benefit of the doubt, or do I give my judgment at that time the benefit of the doubt? Because again, I could be dead by waiting. And it's not to say that he made the right decision. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that when we sit here on Monday and we look at everything that was there, we're not looking at this through the eyes of somebody who was facing that threat in that split second. And the bottom line is, and I say this again, we wouldn't be here at all if the initial decision, it's like we're dealing with a situation from the middle to the end rather than from the beginning to the end. And if you look at why the police were there to begin with, if you look at why they were called there to begin with, what started this, that is something that's being lost in these conversations. We keep looking at it from the middle and we go to the end and say what should have happened. But at the end of the day, the honest part is that those officers would not have been there had they not been called by something that went on in that mall prior to Officer Mensah or even the other 2 officers showing up. And that is a conversation that continues to be lost in the news coverage and in all the things that the family brings up, and in even the things that we bring up about the DA's office. Right or wrong being what Officer Mensah did, we still have to address this situation in this city. We have a record homicide rate in this city right now. And interestingly enough, at least 14 of those people are people under 17 years of age in this city right now. And we're at a record homicide rate in the city of Milwaukee and in Milwaukee County. And we still have more than a whole month left in this year. So we have to address a lot of things.
I'm going to follow up on that in a second, but Andre, I wanted to get your take on it. What would you have done if you had been in Officer Mensah's position?
Well, going from my experience and being in that situation, I may not be the best example because a lot of times, you know, as Ricky stated, I kind of wait a little bit, which is not saying that this is what all officers should do. You know, you assess it, you assess the situation as that you feel that you're in jeopardy or someone else is in jeopardy, and then you act. And in my incidents, you know, I might have waited longer than maybe I should have. And by the grace of God that I'm still here and those people are still here. But, you know, given those situations, you know, I would not wish that on anyone, to have to be in that situation and make a decision and then go through being Monday morning quarterback. Does being in 3 incidents raise questions? Sure it does. Sure, without a doubt. And then that's where you hope that the devices and administrations are in place to ensure that the law was followed. But given those situations, again, that's not something that, you know, that I would wish anyone to be in, because it is a very tough situation.
Harrison, you keep touching on the fact that there's a conversation that's not being had here, and
Yes.
you're touching on the fact that Alvin Cole showed up to the mall with a gun. And police were called to the scene because of someone having a gun.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm also hearing from the other side of things that Alvin Cole may have been racially profiled, that if Alvin Cole had been white, he would still be alive today. What are your thoughts on both of those sides?
You know, if it is funny, we hear that argument a lot, and in some cases that is very true. I mean, without a doubt. I don't think if George Floyd was white, I think he'd still be living. I think if you look at Mr. Castile, I think he would still be living. I look at Dontre Hamilton, I think he would still be living. So there is a lot of validity to the thought behind that. But at the same time, you have to deal with each individual incident as it stands. And if you're looking at a situation involving a young person with a gun, be it white, black, or otherwise, the same thing could have happened. Would it have happened? I don't know. Had it been a white officer running after another white youth with a gun, would he be dead? Maybe, maybe not. We've seen incidences where white offenders have done all kinds of things, and they're taking the Burger King afterwards to get burgers, you know, that kind of thing. We've seen that. So we know that that kind of bias exists. We know that there's systemic problems in both policing and in profiling and all of that. Was that the case here? I don't know. But the interesting thing is no one seems to go back and talk to the people who were involved that called the police on the incident that led up to all of this to begin with, or that began all of this. And a lot of those people were people that looked like myself that were making those calls about what was going on up there. So again, do I know whether Officer Mensah went there or any other officer went there with an idea to shoot Mr. Cole? I doubt they went there with that attitude. Would it have been different had it been somebody else? Maybe so. I'm not saying it would have been. But one of the things that we still have to address as a community is our interactions with police. I'm really concerned for young people, and I try to talk to a lot of young people, both in my own personal life and things that I do on radio, because we have to do a better job in letting young people know how to interact with police and with authority in general. Whether you are right or wrong, you need to live to fight another day. You also need to live to be able to challenge what you thought an officer or any other official did was wrong. Many times, the way that we are setting up these young people by the things that we're listening to in culture, saying, you know, screw the police, I don't have to do this, I don't have to follow orders, I don't have to do whatever it is, we are many times setting them up for damages that happen later, be it right or wrong. And I'm not saying they may be right or wrong, but even when you are, when you're right, there is a way that you can mitigate damages to yourself by how you conduct yourself when you are faced with a situation involving police. In many cases, running is not going to be the issue. In many cases, doing things where you definitively thwart the authority is not going to be won on the street. And we have to do a better job of getting that message out. We can always fight those situations later on. We can challenge them, we can file the complaints, the lawsuits, whatever we need to do. But in many cases, we have to do a better job at getting to young people about how you interact with police. And that's whether they're white, black, or green.
Ricky, do you think that this was a race case, that he was racially profiled, that if Alvin Cole had been white, he'd be alive today? And what is your response to what Harrison is saying, that we're not taking into account all of this events that led up to this shooting?
Well, again, from what I know about the incident, there was some problems. Somebody called Mr. Cole and he came up there with a gun. I disagree with that. A lot of situations that are volatile, when someone introduces a gun to the situation, it goes wrong and it goes bad. But having a gun in itself, as a 17-year-old kid, does not carry the death penalty. We don't have the death penalty here in Wisconsin, and then if we did, due process would be involved. So that being said, I'll address the racial issue. Since I retired from the police department, I see all of these incidents, and I try to figure out, well, what's going on? What's causing these incidents? A lot of the members of police departments in Wisconsin never had contact with black people before they became police officers. Their only knowledge of black people was what they saw on television, what they hear in the media, and a lot of them already have the impression that black people are thugs, are criminals, and are on their way to jail and are dangerous. And a lot of officers are scared of black people. When you look at the history of the police department, the history of policing, or the culture of policing across America, was born out of slavery and slave catching and enforcement of Jim Crow laws and laws that were meant to oppress and suppress minorities. That's the truth, but it's never been dealt with and resolved. It's an ugly truth that we keep in the closet. Until we confront that truth, until we all talk about it as a community and say, you know what, we're going to do better. We're going to keep having these incidents. And we have to find the courage to do that. So, I think race definitely came into the picture. I think that if I had been there, and I know some other officers that had been there in Mensa's position, that Alvin Cole would still be alive. Just on the fact that we probably wouldn't have had that fear, and we probably wouldn't have objectified Mr. Cole. We would have saw him as a human being, and just gave him a little more time before we decided to take his life.
Do you, real quick, I know you want to jump in here, but I think this case, interesting is such a horrible word to use, but Officer Mensa is a black man. Alvin Cole was a black teen. It's interesting that you use the word fear in there, because it's the same race, but there's still that fear.
And that's another thing that people don't understand, is that you can't just look at skin color. You have to look at culture and life experience. Officer Mensa, I think he grew up in Ghana. And I don't think he grew up in like an urban or a hood environment. So, I mean, there were times when I worked on the street, and it's strange how you become acclimated as a police officer. When I was a young officer, and if I had seen a car full of young black guys, as opposed to a car full of young white guys, I probably would have been more careful with the young black guys and felt more of a sense of danger. But, that's the way you're acclimated as a police officer. But me being a black man who grew up in the inner city, you know, after a while I started to overcome that just based on my upbringing. But that is a real thing. I mean, there are officers out there. There are white officers who are afraid of young black males. There's no doubt about that at all. I recall a shooting, I think it happened in Oklahoma, where white female officer is on the scene of a traffic stop. They stop a black male. There are like 4 or 5 other white officers there, and she shot and killed the guy. And she said, "I'd never been so afraid in my life." The other officers never shot the guy, but that fear is a real thing, and that's another thing that has to be dealt with, because it is real and it is causing some of these events.
Did you want to jump in?
Well, you actually touched on something that I was going to speak on when you deal with the race of Joseph Mensah and, unfortunately, the victim, Mr. Cole. The one thing that's kind of interesting in that is if you were able to show anything in the history of Joseph Mensah that showed that he had some predisposition about looking in the mirror or something like that. Like we have a former sheriff in this Milwaukee County that seems to have a problem with who he looks at in the mirror. I don't think that was the case with Officer Mensah, even though I don't know him like that, but I don't think there's been anything to report that he had a problem with people that looked like himself in his personal life or in how he conducted himself. When you look at these 3 shootings, and again, there were 3 minorities, 1 Latino and 2 black individuals. As tragic as that is, and it may look like a pattern, and it may be, and again, I'm not saying this to defend Officer Mensah, but I'm just saying that sometimes when we look at things after the fact, we look at how things are laid out. Some people will play the lottery for 50 straight years and never win. Some people will play twice in a year and win both times. Sometimes life throws things like that at you. And I'm not saying that, did he come out of the house looking to kill somebody that day? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think many officers do that, even some that are probably some really bad actors. But I think that when we look at, again, the time frame, I think he was probably judged more on the other incidents than on this one. Because when you hear anything being said about this incident, it is always brought up, there's been 3 shootings in 5 years. The thing that we have to remember is as individuals, we all want due process. We all do. If we were stopped for any reason by the police, we went through the courts or we went through the DA and whatever and were exonerated, we would not want or would we accept these issues being brought up about what happened then. If we were not convicted of those things cannot continue being brought up against us. So if there's a question about any of those other incidences, they should be judged on each of those incidences, period. And if there was a finding of either not guilty or guilty or whatever it is, they should stand on their own. That's why it's important to look at who a DA is and the decisions that that DA is rendering to make sure that that person is both following the law and doing the right thing. So we cannot keep regurgitating things that have happened if they've gone through their process. Now, some of those processes are not fair. Some of those processes are biased in and of themselves. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that's an end all, but we can't keep trying the same thing over and over when a person has went through whatever they went through. And I think that if we were on the other side of that, we wouldn't want something like that judging us because we happen to be in something and we happen to make a decision that other people don't like, as long as those decisions were deemed justified.
I'm going to move on to the next question unless you've got something to add that hasn't already been said, Andre?
No.
Okay. My last question, since we're losing daylight here, they didn't fire Officer Mensah. He resigned. Do you think that he should have been fired? Do you agree with his resignation? Do you think that Officer Mensah would have been a liability to the Wauwatosa Police Department?
You know, given the situation, I don't think he should have been fired, not at all. As far as him resigning, you know, as an officer, you know, when I first joined the Milwaukee Police Department, my whole goal was to try to be an example for my community. I wanted to, you know, learn and be able to come back and you know, show what I've learned or, you know, be an influence, a positive influence on my community throughout the city. And if due to the circumstances, whether there's blame there or not there, his decision to resign is probably for the best, because if he, like many other officers, we all had joined to try to make the city better, and by his being there takes away from that, that might have been the best decision.
Ricky?
You want to know if I think Officer Mensah should resign?
Do you think he should have been fired? Do you think it was a good call for him to at least resign? And do you think that he would have been a liability to the force?
Yeah, again, after I saw the second shooting, it was so, the facts of that shooting are so egregious to me from the standpoint of an investigator, from the standpoint of police protocol. To me, Officer Mensah should be in jail. To me, he should be in jail. It should have never even got to a third shooting. But the problem is this, and I'm going to admit to you that when I was a detective and I would investigate police-related shootings, I was trained and conditioned not to objectively investigate the shooting and let the evidence and the facts lead where they may. I was trained and conditioned to help to exonerate the officer. And when I look at some of the facts of these shootings, and I look at some of the conclusions that these officers have come to, I realize that, for lack of a better term, these officers have been brainwashed. They're doing the same thing that I used to do. They're trying to find a way to justify what Officer Mensah did when it's so wrong. I mean, it really is. It's contrary to what a police officer's duty. Being a police officer is more than a job. It's a calling and it's a duty. And what he did is so contrary to that. And to see those officers try to justify that, it's terrible. It really is. So in my opinion, yes, Officer Mensah is a liability. I think that he would kill again. And I think that he's going to kill again. I think that he's going to find a way to kill somebody else, whether he's a police officer or not. And I think he should be in jail.
Harrison?
Well, each of those questions it poses something different. Do I think he should have been fired? You have to base that based on what the DA has rendered in terms of his decision on the validity of that shooting. That you kind of have to base some of that on that. You also have to look at whatever police protocols he either did or did not violate. And that has to be a decision made based on what he violated, not based on what the opinion is after the fact. If you fired him and you did not have just cause that could be proven in the court. Now, I'm not saying again, I wasn't there. So I do not know whether there's information that the DA has left out of the public that the public should know. But if a DA rendered a decision that he did nothing wrong and the police department fires him, then you have a tremendous liability on the part of Wauwatosa in terms of paying millions of dollars in a lawsuit that he would win. At the same time, you asked if I think he's a liability. Yes. Even though I don't necessarily think that firing him would have been the right thing to do, I think his resignation is wise for a lot of reasons. I think it doesn't prolong the fact of him being there, and I think that he still would remain a liability even if you have judged him not to have been at fault. I think the fact that he would still be there would raise not only suspicions to the police department, but I think that the citizens that come in contact with him would feel a certain type of way, and then anybody that would still have contact with the police department would deal with it with a level of suspicion that is, in my opinion, unnecessary. So I think that his resignation was a wise thing, but at the same point, I'm sure he got paid very well to make that decision. I have no doubt that whether it's above the table or beyond the table, he didn't do that just going away. But would it have been more costly had he stayed? Yes, absolutely. It would be more costly to everyone involved.
That was my last specific question. If there's anything I didn't cover, whether it be about police brutality in our area, racially profiling this case, Mensa, anything. Table's yours. You guys can say what you want to say. Last remarks. Whoever wants to start can start.
Well, I just want to say this, is that in my 32 years on the police department, every success I had was due to somebody in the community cooperating with me. And that as long as there is a divide between the police and the community, the relationship will be dysfunctional. And Harrison mentioned the soaring homicide rate. But you know, we think about the violence, but I mean, the level of police service it's just terrible. You have police officers who would not dare live in their own squad areas. I mean, you have areas that were high crime areas back in 1982 when I first came on the job that are still high crime areas now. Now, if I hired you to do a job and 32 years later the job was not done, I mean, we would have to have a talk. So obviously the method of policing in general is, I don't want to say corrupted, but it needs a major overhaul. So I think that we really have to honestly go back and confront the racial issues on the police department, because there have been a lot. I mean, Kern talked about Philando Castile, he talked about George Floyd. There have been many, many more. I mean, when they have police academy classes, police history should be part of it. How to deal with stress, how to deal with fear, how to deal with racism. All that should be part of the training, because you're going to experience all of those things. So until those things change, we're going to keep spinning our wheels. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I'd like to add, and Ricky hit it right on the head, and I think it's often overshadowed. The police department, I don't care, you know, whether it's the greatest one in this entire country or the worst one, it all starts with the community. The community, you know, and I can't emphasize this enough. You know, I didn't solve any crime. Any crime does not get solved without the cooperation of the citizens, period. And it's very few times where an officer actually walks across something in progress where he does not need a citizen to testify to what has happened. And so when people look at our police department and act like it's an entity all to itself, that's wrong. For the police department to look at itself as an entity like they know what's best for the community, is wrong. That department, any department, cannot function without the cooperation of its citizens, period. And I don't care what chief you get, if they don't understand that fact, we will continue to be exactly where we are 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because they cannot form that bond. And that community, our community, whether you're on the south side, north side, you must form that relationship with your department, period.
Thank you.
And I want to add to what both Ricky and Andre just said. I'm going to go back 28 years ago. And if you go back 28 years ago, in 1992, there was an incident at District Number 5 that led to 5 black police officers filing a complaint against what was going on the police department at that time. Something that was happening under the direction of a person named Haggerty. We had a complaint that grew to about 45 black police officers complaining about issues on the police department that actually deals with exactly what you're talking about in terms of community relations. When here you have people on the department complaining about the treatment and things that they are being subjected to. This went to the Justice Department for over 7 years after a 3-year investigation by the EEOC here. 7 years later, not only did the Justice Department drop the case without proper cause, but the very person that was at the crux of that case came back to be the chief of the Milwaukee Police Department with the approval of our Fire and Police Commission. So when I tell you about how dysfunctional the Fire and Police Commission has been for decades, it has been indeed that. And I was one of those people who made that complaint back in 1992.